Hi, everybody. Good morning. It's morning. Good morning, and welcome to Conversations with Calvin, We the Species. I've been actually talking with John Nachlinger for a while now, even before he went on air, because I'm fascinated with his background because he's a Texan, and as I told John, Texas actually changed the course of my life because I met my wife because I told her I was from Texas. Random. And that's how I met my wife, and that's how my whole world has changed because I was from Texas. No, I'm from Newark, New Jersey, by the way. I have to tell you, I was born in Newark. And John is a preeminent, uh, I'm going to quote here, men's divorce strategist. And we're going to talk all about divorce, divorce. That was a song, I guess. Was that Dolly Parton? I forget. Southern song. But anyway, John is so interesting. Such a background. The divorce stuff, being from Texas, finding his way to New Jersey, and with this preeminent law firm, and other elements to this whole picture. So this, what a fabulous interview, and I'm kind of thrilled. The mechanics of the universe got us together to talk about some stuff here. Why? Because I'm a product of divorce. And it's funny, the first time I met my wife, first question I asked her, by the way, were you ever married before? And it was a hell of a question to ask. I didn't even want to talk to her. I needed to find a woman who was divorced like me. I thought it would be an easier road. We could talk about that. Is it an easier road? I don't know. But anyway, so this is great. I'm so glad, John, that you're spending the time here. And again, I thank the particles of the universe that got us together here. So I'm done with my monologue, and why don't you do a little intro, and then we're gonna talk some serious stuff, and then not so serious, some sweet stuff. Okay, take it away.
Well, like as you said, I am from Texas, but I've been up in the New Jersey, New York area for I think 24 years now, almost 24 years. As I was telling you before, my second week of being up here was 9/11, so it was quite an introduction to the
Wow.
area from Texas. But yeah, I've been a divorce attorney for over 20 years now. I really concentrate on helping men through divorce now. And get rid of all my stress of dealing with this crazy profession, I started a cookie business a few years ago as well. So I get to go like this weekend, we're doing a really fun punk rock festival, which is a fun place to go and interact with people that I don't normally get to see in the courtroom and have a great old time. I love meeting people, and it's allowed me to really see people that I would never see in my normal everyday life. So yeah, but thank you for having me.
No, this is great. Really, it's great stuff. And of course, you work in Princeton, and that was one of my last gigs as a pharmacist working in Princeton. And there's probably no place on earth quite like Princeton. It's so unique, and the air is filled with special particulates. You breathe that wonderful air, that Princeton air. Uh, uh, AIR, HEIR, the whole, I'm making this up as I go along. But there's nothing quite like Princeton. And then I showed you this. This has been, Albert Einstein lived on Mercer Street in Princeton, and I've had this picture looking at me for at least 15 years in a channel, spiritually, a channel. But it actually made a difference. In long story, but anyway, so let's talk a little bit about. I'm a product of divorce. I mean, I was divorced, and it's how I met my second wife, current wife. Sound like there's more. But let's talk about. I have a whole bunch of legal questions to ask. It fascinates me, especially a men's divorce strategist. So, um, first question: what method should people use to get divorced? There's lots of ways to get divorced.
Yeah, well, going to court's not the one you're going to want to do. So these days, I don't know why anyone would step foot in a courtroom anyway. It's like it takes years to get divorced, and I mean, once you decide your marriage is going to be over, you kind of want it done as quickly as possible. It's kind of like finding out you're going to have surgery, but the doctor says, I'm going to schedule it 2 years from now. So you have to think about it for 2 years. It's ridiculous. So these days, divorce mediation is really the way to go. And what's great about it now is you don't have to have attorneys, you don't have to do any of that crap. You just go in, get somebody that's trained in doing this, and you can be done. The whole thing can be done in like 2 or 3 months. And you're finished, you didn't spend a lot of money, and it's great. And people still think, and I think it's because we have so many like lawyer shows on TV and stuff, and they're used to seeing courtrooms and everything. They think that they gotta go pay an attorney a bunch of money and then they have to go to court. And no, that is like the old way of thinking. So one of my missions is to make sure people understand that, deciding you're going to get divorced is the hardest thing. That's hard. It's like making that decision's the hard part. Once you make the hard part, the rest of it shouldn't be hard. And people make it hard. So if you kind of go into it thinking, all right, we don't have to each pay whatever attorneys are charging. We can actually just go get a mediator. Great. You can get the whole thing done. And I really hope that people start to figure it out because, attorneys like to make money. I mean, I am an attorney. Attorneys like to make money. So they prefer you hire them and let them battle it out for you, but it's no good for you.
I like the way you said that. Interesting, interesting. I've seen enough attorney movies and stuff. What is the first thing that men need to do? And this, I guess, is really important. What is the first thing that men need to do when divorce is like on the horizon?
So it's interesting. Men kind of come at divorce from like two primary places, at least that I've seen over the years working with so many men. One is the guy who had no idea it was coming. And I'm kind of saying that tongue in cheek because if they had kept their eyes open and paid attention, they would have known it was coming. But they're completely caught off guard. They don't know why is this happening to me? And then there's the other guys who have kind of moved on. Maybe found somebody else, they've moved on, they're ready to get divorced. So the first thing that guys have to do is to plan. Because what is the one thing women are great at doing? Planning. They're good at talking to their friends, they're good at journaling, they're good at organizing their thoughts, they're good at doing all those things. Guys, we suck at it. So the first thing you got to do is kind of figure out how to get yourself organized, kind of figure out how to get your financial life organized. Got to figure out how to, if you've got kids, try to figure out the things about your kids that you don't know. Like, for example, who are their best friends, who are their best friends' parents, who are their teachers, their principals, like the information that you're gonna be kind of silly if you're like asking for, all this time with your kids and you can't even like name who their teacher is. Like it's stuff like that. And then sort of the other things, the darker parts of this whole thing, which is like you gotta learn how to protect your freedom. And by that, I mean a lot of people now use domestic violence kind of as a tool to try to get an upper hand, and it happens all the time. And it happens when people you never would have thought would ever do it to you, do it. And then finally, you got to protect your mind, your sanity, your mindset. You got to figure out how to really take care of you because after the divorce is done, you're the one that's going to be left with you, and you've got to figure out who you're going to be. A lot of times I think a lot of guys when you're married, you become like this shell of who you really are because maybe you're in this bad marriage, maybe you just feel like you're in a dead hole. And so guys have to sort of figure out what the next chapter is going to be. And that starts right then because if you can't see the next chapters and your divorce is difficult, it's only going to put you into that like spiral and you're going to get more and more depressed. So really when you start thinking about divorce, you got to take all of those things and start planning pretty quickly. And don't put your head in the ground because that's what guys do. They pretend like it's not going to happen. Like, oh, this isn't really happening, and it is happening. So figure it out. Get with the program and make the best of it. Otherwise, it's going to be shitty, and you're going to be that person who just goes around for the next 10 years complaining about how bad it was and how horrible your ex-wife was and how your life sucks. And all the while you're getting older and we only live once. So why are you going to be miserable? Figure it out, move on, and get the next chapter of your life because your next chapter is going to be awesome. It is if you want it to be.
Right. And I can attest to that because the product of the second marriage. By the way, slightly off topic. Uh,
Mhm.
I always thought, and somehow I get the feeling I'm wrong, that second marriages are like guaranteed to be successful, but somehow I get the feeling that's not the case. Are there statistics that you know of that second marriages are not really overwhelmingly successful? Is that true?
Yeah, second marriages fail at a higher rate than first marriages,
Wow.
and it's interesting. Here's what's really interesting, Calvin, is the marriage rate, the divorce rate is coming down. Like just generally speaking across the country, the divorce rate's coming down. But you know why it's coming down? The marriage rate is coming down.
Right.
So fewer people that shouldn't have gotten married in the first place aren't getting married. But that being the case, the second marriages still fail at a higher rate. And it's my opinion, the reason they fail at a higher rate is because people don't put in any work when they get divorced to figure out why did my marriage fail? And then they go and they end up marrying the same person and having the same marriage, expecting, that there's going to be a different result. And that's why it's so key. You can't just run out and get remarried. And I see guys do it all the time. They run out, they start dating someone, and they're married within 6 months. Really? You think it's going to be any better? You didn't have any time to think about why did this fail? Because guess what? If a marriage failed, it didn't fail because one person did something. It failed because both of you there's something in the relationship that didn't work. You got to figure it out. Otherwise, you're just gonna repeat yourself again. But yeah, second marriages fail at a much higher rate. So be sure if you're getting married again to get a prenup.
We'll talk about that in a minute. The whole
Mhm.
thing with prenups. I always marvel at my divorce because I told you before I went on air, I had nothing. I was unemployed. I had nothing. And the only thing I told my attorney, who happened to have been my uncle, that's bad. Nepotism is bad in law. I just made this up. So I told my uncle, I just want my sweat socks and my sneaks and my desk and no problem. Because it was a great divorce, truly. There was no property. The thing, I guess, the thing to do in a divorce is to have no property, have nothing. And of course, we were young marrieds, and this was a long time ago, and there was no property, and there was nothing. So you get divorced anyway. But I think it made a better person out of me, that whole process. And maybe it helped. You know, we're at 48 years now. Um, if you can process that number. Oof. 48 years, second marriage. That hurt too. And it was very important for me. The first thing I asked her, were you ever married before? And she said yes. And, my face lit up because I thought in an uneducated way that, if two people are divorced, that at least they've learned, hopefully. And you just said, obviously, people don't learn, is what you just said. Don't learn. Interesting. Um, We started off, and you mentioned the word mediation. So, what is divorce mediation, and how does it work? And just two people can do it.
Yeah, and a mediator can be anybody. It doesn't have to be an attorney. I mean, some people use clergy, some people use, financial people, some people use therapists. I mean, it sort of depends on what you need resolved. But really, at its core, a mediator is just a neutral third party, somebody who just can sit there and kind of be a referee and facilitate a conversation. I think attorneys generally are a little bit better mediators just because they kind of know the things that you need to agree to, so they can kind of guide you piece by piece. But really, I think if people really want to keep this process quick and inexpensive, they're going to agree on most things. And most people don't even know what they need to agree to. So that's the problem is if you don't know what you need to agree to, it makes it more difficult. But if you have someone kind of guiding you. So, I mean, like I mediate all the time. And what's great is I get people in that don't have attorneys and I sit them down and I say, okay, let's talk about your kids. And, we just talk about their kids and what do your kids do after school? What are their lives like? What is your schedule? What is her schedule? And, as we're sitting there talking, it sort of comes together as opposed to coming in like when people want to fight, they come in like saying, I want equal time with the kids, or I want this, or I want that. you come at it from a more of a like practical perspective, and we're talking about it, just sitting around the table. We're on Zoom. I do a lot of Zoom mediation, and basically once people resolve things, and I will say, and this might just be me, might be other people out there, but most people, about 80% of the people I mediate for, we resolve their entire divorce in under 3 hours. Like under 3 hours, just sitting there on Zoom, we get it all done. Because people want to agree. They want it done quickly. It's difficult, it's painful, it's like pulling off a band-aid. Like they want it done. They just need a partner that's going to help them get it done. So mediation is really the way to go. And I try to tell people when they're well, you asked a minute ago about what do you need to do before you start divorce. The first thing I talk to particularly men about is to say, listen, you got to sit down with your wife and say, okay, this is happening. How do we make the best of it? Like, how do we get this done so our family keeps more of our money, blah, blah, blah. Like, you got to sit down and have that conversation right off the bat, before it goes off the rails. Because the second someone hires an attorney, especially if it's, an attorney that likes to fight, it can go off the rails real quick.
You know, it's I find it refreshing to talk to an attorney about this process. And it's just a refreshing because there's so many movies. Yeah, I remember that Michael Douglas, Kathleen Turner movie. Danny DeVito was the divorce attorney. I forgot the name. Pretty nasty. It was a pretty nasty divorce. They're living in the same house and they hated each other. And um, it was brutal. And actually, I watch movies sometimes 50 times, 100 times. I could only watch that once. I forgot the name of it. Just a brutal depiction. He was a very successful attorney in and of himself, Michael Douglas. And she, Kathleen Turner was gorgeous and this and that, and they were successful, and their divorce became this horrible, horrible experience. To the point, like I said, I couldn't, and it was a bad ending because they both died. It was
Yeah.
not giving anything away. Anyway, um, um, interesting question because it's more part of our culture today. And I come from working at the Women's Health Institute at Robert Wood Johnson Rutgers Medical School, and the term LGBTQ is part of our culture today. How does LGBTQ and divorce work?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. The LGBTQ community got the right to marry. Now they get the right to divorce too. It's like you get both at the same time. But it's interesting in that what I've been seeing is a lot of people who have gotten married, who have been together for years, because a lot of these couples were together for years and years and years, and now they've gotten married, and then fairly quickly decide to get divorced. It's kind of like that. It's kind of like that whole thing where people they've got a great relationship and then they introduce marriage for some reason, and it introduces something that they weren't expecting. But I work with a lot of people in the community, and it's not just same-sex couples getting divorced. I also have over the years represented more than 70 guys who have been divorcing a woman who have been coming out. So it's been that part too, and those have been some of the worst divorces I've ever been a part of. The amount of betrayal that these women feel is off the charts.
Wow.
Um, and those cases when it comes to like custody and everything else are some of the worst that I've ever been through.
Wow.
And it's like and it's funny, it's like if their husband had cheated on them with a woman, okay, they're mad about it, but maybe they can move on. But it's the fact that it's with somebody of the same sex. Now all of a sudden it's like this horrible thing. But yeah, it's a whole interesting area now. We've in New Jersey, we've had civil unions for quite some time before marriage became legal. So we've been dealing with this for a while. But what's interesting is guys, when they're going through a divorce, like two guys are going through a divorce, their divorces tend to be very simplistic, tend to be pretty easy. They tend to be very motivated to save money.
Wow.
Two women going through a divorce with children, um, those can be the most vicious, nasty. Because think about it, you've got like two mothers, and especially if you've got a young child, and that mother instinct already is kicking in that young children should be with me. Well, you got two that think the same thing. So it's those can be really, really rough. And but like I said, our community fought for the right to marry. Well, now you get the right to divorce and all the fun that comes along with that.
The minute that the minute that the right to marry is granted, and I guess it's assumed that there's also the right to divorce, or did that have to develop on its own, or
Mm-mm.
that was automatic? It
Yep.
was automatic.
Yep.
Wow, interesting. Wow, the insights I'm getting it. It's so interesting. Somehow there's a TV pilot here. I don't know. Maybe there is. I don't know. Let's just go off topic a second. I always like to take a deep breath. Uh, being a journalist, I have role models, and one of them was Barbara Walters, and she asked this great question, and I plagiarized. So you don't have to answer, but it's cute. Excluding family or friends, somebody living or dead you'd like to spend a day with.
That one's not hard for me.
Good.
It's for me, it's Barack Obama. I would I would love to spend a day with him. I'm
Goodness.
just fascinated by him. It's just I know he's more of a recent figure. Sort of alive. That would be who I'd want to spend time with. And dead, this one's very interesting, but I'm a big fan of English history. I'm just a huge English history buff. I would probably want to go back and spend time with I'm torn. Either King Henry VIII or Queen Elizabeth I. One of those two. Just because I feel like that was such a really important time in the history of not just England, but also the United States. Like everything that happened after that kind of led to where we are today. And I'd like to go back there and just sort of, see what was going on. Maybe more Elizabeth the First, because that's where, we got Shakespeare and a bunch of other really important figures. So yeah, so one living, one dead. How about that?
That's great. I like the way you did that. It's great. It's not nice answer. Really interesting answer. I forget which British monarch had all those horrible laws which pushed us to throw tea in the harbor. I forget. Who is that? Was that King
That's
Charles?
George, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I was trying to remember. Whoever that was, his laws just got to be so ridiculous that it pushed us to seek our independence.
One of the stars of the musical Hamilton. One of the funny part of the whole musical.
Funny, Lin-Manuel Miranda actually I saw it, of course, and I wrote him. Uh, I'm a great letter writer. I don't know what that means, but I'm a really good letter writer. So I wrote him a letter, and he actually wrote me back a nice note. I invited him to come on this conversation with Calvin. He says he's rather busy. I said, sure, I know you're busy. And he said if he wasn't this busy, he would have actually considered it. But he actually took the time to write a handwritten note and with his little card and picture. And it's pretty cool. But it's funny you said that. The whole Hamilton thing was interesting. All right, so back to work. We discussed this sort of. The marriage rate is decreasing here, which means that the divorce rate is decreasing. You said that already, and how does that affect your journey?
Well, I think as a community of people that are helping people in marriages, we have to really be much more cognizant of people that aren't married that are ending relationships, but maybe own houses together and have children together and are doing all these things that kind of like they were married, but they just never were married. Because that's really where society is heading. It really is going that direction. I know I know people that are deeply religious are very much not liking this, but it's just where society is going. So I've really been thinking about how I, as a member of the legal community and the coaching community, can start to help people who are not married and figure out what they need to do to in their marriage in their relationships, but in a way that doesn't destroy either party. But also that goes back to education because here's what's really interesting, Calvin, is I people think that all these old-fashioned things still exist, like like for example, palimony is a great example. I just got a call the other day from someone, a woman who was like she was living with some guy for a long time and he basically kicked her out. And it was his house, he owned everything. And she's like, we're going after him for palimony. And I had to tell her that at least in New Jersey, palimony doesn't really exist unless you put something in writing. You have to have something in writing you both sign. Without writing, there's nothing. So people have this all these ideas about what their rights are now, and they really don't know. So I really feel like that's the next underserved community of people are people that are in these non-marital relationships and figure out tell them how to protect themselves if they're not going to get married. And then when they end these relationships, like figure out how to help them end it with dignity. Because right now, someone really gets screwed really badly. I know people in divorce think someone gets screwed a lot, but more often than not, people kind of leave with relatively the same amount of money. But people that aren't married, you can get screwed really easily. I mean, if it's your house and you kick out the person that's living with you, I mean, there's not much you can do about it because you're not married.
And that obviously goes on all the time. So I'm thinking, I'm an environmentalist among other things, and I keep reading, seeing all kinds of tidbits about zero population growth in how countries. So we're talking about the marriage rate decreasing, and we're also talking about, which is kind of parenthetical, we're also talking about zero population growth. So this whole issue, this whole societal structure is being pulled in a lot of different directions, and we've got serious, zero population growth. I mean, there's some countries, even Italy, one of my favorite places on earth. They have a hard time. So do we here in America. We're approaching, numbers, and when, we're not going to see that, but I mean, it's happening. And so then divorce is right smack in the middle of all that. Less divorce, less marriage, less children, and then we're dealing with massive issues of infertility, and then adoption, comes into the picture, and we share that wonderful place in the world, adoption. But anyway, I'm just kind of rambling, but everything kind of just seems to fit what you just said, with marriage and divorce and less children.
Yeah, it's an issue that we're gonna have to kind of grapple with. One of my favorite classes I took in undergrad was a class on population. I mean, that's what it was about. And
Wow.
and I just remember really going through that a lot. But I mean, the one thing that people just don't really understand about the United States is that almost all of our population growth is through immigration, and I think right now what's interesting is we're kind of there's a backlash against people immigrating now. And I'm like, well, without immigration, the country will start to decline population size because we need our, but I don't know. It's really interesting. That's a whole different conversation because I don't know to what extent like our whole new world with like AI and probably where we're going with robots and stuff, like how that's going to offset, maybe us not having as many children. It's really an interesting thing. And there's a lot of people out there that, this kind of comes up in the divorce world a lot. The whole like women staying at home to have kids and then going back to work and all this sort of stuff. There's sort of this backlash where women have been taught, I think they've just all like learned over the years that they really need to be working and not staying home for themselves. Because if they get divorced, they're going to be in a bad spot. But that makes them, want to have children later on, which leads to the infertility you were just talking about, and then usually only want to have like one or two children. Whereas, back in the 50s, 60s, 70s, people were having three, four, five children, and that was pretty common. So it's an interesting issue that's happening. But it is related to marriage and divorce. It's all like all these concepts are all related, but it's kind of like I don't know what the solution is. I don't know how we can sort of fix it, but it's all kind of moving in the same direction together. And I know right now, in our country, there's a group of people really want to kind of take us back to a time when it was much more traditionalist, with women staying at home and having kids and all that sort of stuff. But it's not ever going to go back there. So, it's kind of like we got to figure out how to make this all work. And the marriage laws and the divorce laws are all part of that. I mean, think about it, Calvin. Like we used to not have no fault divorce.
Yeah,
And why people don't even understand why that was important for women, because women couldn't really get out of marriages because they had to have a reason and then they had to prove the reason. And then so really all these concepts are also sort of interrelated. And I don't really see anyone really trying to figure out any kind of reasonable solutions to all of these issues. Maybe someone will start to talk about it, but for now, we're kind of stuck in this rut, and it's just going to continue with everyone, pointing fingers and just being upset about the population not growing as
yeah,
it should. But
yeah,
and by the way, an adoption is great. I really hope my wish is for the world, not just for the United States, but all the countries of the world, that we just have much more just sort of open adoption borders, let people adopt from anywhere. There's so many places where there's barriers to adoption, but there's so many people that want to adopt. I mean, there's countries, I know in Eastern Europe in particular, that have these orphanages that have just thousands and thousands of kids. And people, particularly in the Western world, want to go and adopt. And there's all these barriers to adoption. Same thing with like Asia. There's a lot of people here that want to go to Asia to adopt children. And it's so difficult. I mean, some people, when you adopt from a place like China in particular, it can be years before you can get through all the red tape to get to an adoption. And kids need homes. We gotta get kids in homes as much as possible.
correct.
In New Jersey, Calvin, I can't even tell you, there are so many children, particularly children of color, that don't have homes, and we need people to open up their hearts and find it in their heart to adopt and give these kids a good home.
Yeah,
Because it's gonna be good for society. It really is. It's gonna be good for everybody if these kids grow up in a loving home.
agreed. To me, there's nothing in the world like adoption. It's a wonderful listen. Every day of my life, now I'm a grandfather as a byproduct of adoption, and that's really interesting that you said that because I told you, um, I might as well plug. There's a tortoise in my hair. The journey to spirit. There's a chunk of this is devoted to a character's journey to become a parent and eventually through adoption. And there's some really interesting thoughts, and I'm working now with this amazing woman who's a book marketer, and she said, Calvin, there's a whole thing that you can extract a whole book in here about that journey to adoption to become a parent. And one of the things is certain realizations, uh, um, certain realizations, and as I look today at my world and my son who's adopted and my grandchildren, but they're not here unless I did what I had to do. So there's really no difference between intellectually between genetics and adoption because a grandchild is here because I made that decision, and it's in. I find it really interesting. I find it really interesting, and anyway, gosh, we could we could just do a separate thing about the beauty and the wonder and the majesty and the joy of adoption, maybe to be
Yeah,
continued.
be Calvin, being a parent's a choice. It's not biology. And
Right.
people get confused about it all the time. I hear all kinds of people say, "Well, I'm the father." I'm like, "Okay, well, just because your genes are in this child doesn't mean you're a father or a mother. That's a choice you have to make to be a parent." And people that adopt make the choice with eyes wide open that they want to be a parent. And so, in a lot of ways, they're the best. They can be some of the best parents because they decided to go
Correct.
out proactively and adopt somebody.
Correct. It's interesting you said that, John, because when we were in the throes of in vitro, and that was back in those days, it was an early thing in vitro, which had almost zero success rate. Percentages were really low. But the psychologist, and I wrote about this in my book, the psychologist asked my wife, do you want to be pregnant or do you want to be a mother? Interesting. And that became the piece of energy that kind of moved her in the right direction. When you think about it, do you want to be a mother, or in my case, do you want to be a father, or do you want to be pregnant?
Mhm.
That illuminated that whole piece of the journey from my wife. And I look at my grandchildren. One is 3 and the other's 2, a year apart. There's nothing quite on earth like it. The best. It really is the best, especially when they're a mile away. That's even better. Great stuff. All right, so back to another off-topic question that I like to ask. Um, Favorite movies.
Oh, favorite movies. It's interesting. My taste in movies has changed so much as I've gotten older.
Okay.
But these days, I'm not going to name you a movie. I'm going to name a genre because I could not name you my favorite movie because I love so many movies. I will tell you just like a movie that I like to watch when I just need like a pick me up, a fun movie. I'm really into politics. I majored in political science. I'm really into politics. I thought I was going to be a politician, but it's just something that I can't stomach for my family, the way that it works these days. But one of my favorite movies is a movie called Dave. Got Calvin Klein, Sigourney Weaver. I mean, it's one of my. It's like this
By the way,
light.
I love that movie.
It's just
Love, love.
it's just it's great, and I because I love politics. It kind of like it's comedy, politics, good feelings, everything all together. So but I love like those kind of just lighthearted comedies because what I do is so like not lighthearted most of the time and it's very deep. I feel like I can't just watch dramas and things that are like really emotional because I deal with that all day every day. I'm pretty sensitive as an attorney. Like I can be prone to tears when people are telling me their stories about custody. Like it just because it's very human for us to, feel that way, and not many attorneys do, unfortunately. So I like to watch the comedies. I'm like really into like even slapstick comedies, whatever they are. The funnier they are, the better. I'm all about it.
Okay. I love. There's a scene in Dave when she's beginning to have those feelings that he's not like my husband, Kevin Kline, and they're going, I think they're going to that
Much shelter.
the homeless shelter, and they're sitting in the back of the car, and he's kind of, and her skirt is kind of rolled up a little bit, and he's kind of looking at her legs, and she sees him looking, and he looks the other way, and it was at that beginning of and by the way, it's true, John. I watch that movie every couple of months. I'll grab it from back here and I'll throw it in and I watch it because I love it. It's just a great. And by the way, I love Charles Grodin. Uh,
Hmm.
he plays Bloom. His attorney, a friend or accountant. He's an accountant. And who does it? And he says, "Who does these books? They're in the White House. Who does these books?" And they have to find $600 million in order to open up that that child, that
Yeah.
home
Guys,
insurance.
the next line is the funniest one. If I ran my business like this, I'd be out of business.
Yes,
I
yes.
love it. I love
Love
it.
it, love it. And then,
Yeah.
what do you want for lunch? Neapolitan knockwurst or something. And
Not work.
and Charles Grodin says, "I love that. You know, I love that." And, it's just, it's a priceless. It's a, yeah. So I agree. I love that too. So we're on the same.
Yeah.
Okay, back to work. So, how do you find and kind of how do you go about hiring and finding an attorney?
Oh, that's like $1 million question. So, listen, it doesn't matter what your friend down the street told you or what your buddy at work told you. The worst thing you can do is just go hire an attorney that somebody else used and got some great result that they liked. Like, don't ever do that. The best thing you can do is go talk to at least three attorneys. I'd say minimum of three. I wouldn't do more than like five, just because at some point, like, what are you doing? Like, just, do your research in advance. But look for people that practice divorce and family law. Like, if you go on their website and they say slip and fall, municipal court, dog bites, blah, 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 divorce. No. I mean, you want to go to someone who's clearly that's what they do primarily is divorce. And then it is not important in today's age to go find an attorney that's in your town. You don't have to be that narrow with where you're looking. The way that our courts work now, this is everywhere in the country, is there's so many virtual things now. You can get an attorney that's 30 minutes from a courthouse or an hour from a courthouse. You need to be concentrated more on who's good for you, who who's actually going to listen to you and that you feel like you can listen to them and trust them. It's very much like having a therapist. Like not everyone, you know, meshes with their therapist right off the bat. Same thing with an attorney. You kind of have to make sure that you trust them, that what they're saying you will internalize. And you have to feel like they're listening to you. And most importantly, and by the way, gender has nothing to do with anything. So don't think if I'm a man, I need to get a male attorney. If I'm a woman, I need to get a female attorney. That's nonsense. Don't do that. But more than anything, before you go to an attorney, you got to be clear on what you want. Like, what is it you want? Do you want this done quickly, inexpensively? Like that's what you want. You need to find an attorney that not only agrees with you or says yes, we'll do that, but can articulate to you exactly how they're going to get it done. I see so many people, they kind of just say, "Oh, this person's great. They have a great reputation. I'm gonna let them take care of me." Well, what's going to happen? And this happens with probably just about any professional, is if you don't give them direction, they're going to do it the way they want to do it. And then before you know it, you've lost control. And so the one thing that I just am very adamant on with anyone going through a divorce is it's your life. It's nobody else's. It's your life, your money, your children. And so you need to find an attorney that understands that this is what you're looking for and that that's what you want them to do. And so when you're interviewing attorneys, you need to be very clear on, listen, if this is what I want, what are you going to do to help me get there? And if they just give you some BS, generic answer, go somewhere else. Try to find someone who's actually thinking about you and your family and actually seems like they care about you. Now, I know you might make a mistake. I mean, it's like I'm a business owner. I've hired people I thought were a great fit and they ended up not being. It happens, and it happens. You might have to change attorneys. Don't worry about that. Just try to do the best that you can. That's all we can all do in life, right? Do the best that you can, but really make it a thoughtful process. Three, I would say at least three people. Just interview them and select the one that you feel the most comfortable with.
Okay. Earlier you said that word, prenup. Um, why do you need a prenup?
Oh gosh,
Do we all need a prenup? And why do you need a prenup?
I think just about everybody could benefit from a prenup. Now, all a prenup is it just says that if we get divorced, in the unlikely event we get divorced, we've already decided how everything is going to work. We've already decided how we're going to split things. We've already decided whether or not there's going to be alimony. We've already decided on everything. And so we both know while we're married that that's the expectation of what's going to happen when we get divorced. So we both can live our lives understanding that that's the expectation, that that's what's going to happen. And so a prenup, what it really does is it sort of just takes the mask off of everything. You know, if you're getting married, Calvin, it is at least a 50% chance you're going to get divorced. Like it's just math. It's
Right.
math. There's a 50% chance. Um, we all go get, insurance for all kinds of various things in our life that have a far less than 50% chance of happening. So think of a prenup like an insurance policy, because that's really what it is. Because you can really save yourself so much heartache just by sort of agreeing on what you're going to do. I'll just give you a really easy example because this is the one that I think is what most people think of. You can just agree that if you guys go buy a house together, whatever you both put into the house, when you get divorced, you get that money back. It could be it doesn't have to be anything complicated. It could just be something really nice and easy, just so you both are on the same page. And I usually go to cop conventions a lot because a lot of police officers and military people in the military, they all kind of are have this protection against their pension because they really feel like they really put themselves out there and they deserve their pension. But I go out there to try to educate all of them that if you want to protect your pension, prenup's the only way to do it. Because if you get divorced, you're going to have to share it. So
Wow.
really, it starts with just understanding that the prenup just makes you and your spouse talk about money from the beginning. Because I'm sure you've probably noticed people don't talk about money. It's like they just don't talk about it. It's like they really just, they just it's like this taboo topic. When you're getting married, the most important thing, yeah, love, children, sex, all that stuff, that's important. But the thing that's going to be as important as all of that combined is money, because it's the one thing that you and your spouse are going to have to deal with on a day-to-day basis all the time. The prenup makes you have that conversation before you ever get married. Maybe after that conversation you realize this isn't a good idea. That's happened before, but that's better to have it now than 3 years from now and then have to get divorced.
Yeah, it's funny. I'm thinking there's a couple of very rich people, really rich, and they got divorced. And I know one, I'm talking about Bill Gates' wife. She comes out of that, multi billionaire. So that must have been a prenup back then. But then again, maybe when he was starting out, there was nothing much to really go around. Um, but anyway, I'm just trying to digest. Is that the byproduct of a prenup, and would they have actually even thought about it back in the days when he was poor and he was just kind of starting out? I'm talking about Bill Gates, but his wife, his ex-wife, she's one of the world's wealthiest women. Coming from that. Um, so so it really is a truly valuable, um, really val. There was a one of my favorite Seinfeld episodes. George is trying not to marry Susan, uh, um, and so somebody tells him just ask her for a prenup because she's rich, and she'll just say no, and we're not getting married. So he wanted out. So he thought the prenup, bringing that up, what a way to get out of the marriage. And of course he was wrong. She said, "Yeah, sure, I'll give you a prenup." So, but anyway, it basically, my takeaway from listening to you is basically everybody should do it. Just as a, everybody should just do it. It should be just part of the marriage license. Here's a prenup.
Yeah, because you don't have the prenup doesn't have to cover everything. It can just cover certain things. But it's one of those documents that I feel like most people would benefit from having. just like, well, I could go on a soapbox about estate planning documents and how no one does them. And I don't care how young you are and how healthy you are and how much you think you can conquer the world. Everyone needs, you know, wills, powers of attorney, medical powers of attorney, living wills. You need all that, like, you do all that at the beginning. But prenups are very similar. It's just something, it's just a planning document. It's part of just making sense. And if you're a professional in particular that likes to like plan things and be organized, I don't know why you wouldn't want to have a prenup too. It's just like anything. I really think it just comes back down to people don't think it's romantic. They think, oh, there's no way we're going to get divorced. They have these ideas, but the odds are that you might get divorced. So plan for it.
Last heavy question. Can you talk a little bit about Netsquire?
Yeah, so that is my law firm in New Jersey. So we only service people in New Jersey for now. So what we have done is created a law firm that really focuses in on divorce mediation and uncontested divorce, but does it virtually. So we've cut a lot of the expenses that maybe a lot of law firms have to deal with to be able to provide these services to people for flat fees. So so for divorce mediation in particular, which is my favorite thing that we offer, we actually do the entire process from helping people reach an agreement to the day they get divorced for one fee. It's one fee. It doesn't get higher. It's a
Wow.
flat fee. And it does everything. I mean, and there are places out, the difference between what we do and maybe there's a lot of online stuff out there. The difference is in our office, you're getting, someone who's been doing it for more than 20 years that actually makes sure that everything is covered and your agreement's fully comprehensive of all the different things that might need to be addressed. So it's sort of done, so you kind of get the benefit of a really experienced attorney helping you, but you get it for a predictable cost. And it's something I've wanted to do forever because the average cost of a divorce in New Jersey hovers between 15 and $16,000 per person. Per person.
Wow.
You're talking about families throwing away 30 to $35,000 of their
Wow.
money, and most of the time, if they sat down with a mediator right at the beginning, they could have gotten everything done for $5,000, like the whole thing. So it really, and then you don't have to deal with taking time off work and all the emotion and everything. So it's really been sort of a passion project of mine, and it's my goal is to get out there as much as I can to help people see that this is a better way. And so that's really what we focus in on. We also do traditional divorce because not everyone qualifies for that. There's some people out there that are hell bent on, lighting the whole world on fire. And then, we do adoption and, all the other types of family law, people that are unmarried with kids. But really my goal is to make sure that people see this as a viable option. And let me tell you, I'm fighting against the entire legal community. No one likes it. They don't like the fact that I'm doing it. But everyone that goes through it is grateful and it sets them up for problem solving in the future whenever the next issue comes up. Instead of going to attorneys and fighting, they say, oh my gosh, let's go back to a mediator and figure this out.
What a, and uh, I did my due diligence last night. I was looking at Netsquire and I see this wonderful position, a happiness coordinator. I thought that was great.
It is a great position. So basically what happens is when you call in, you speak to our happiness coordinator who basically like listens to your story, like lets you tell your whole story, and is just a friendly person to like sit there and talk you through everything, help you understand what our process looks like, and then make sure that that you get into whatever that process looks like as easily as possible, kind of hold your hand along the way. Because a lot of times what happens is you go and you meet with an attorney and they kind of just throw you in, like, sign these documents and let's get started. But I really feel like a lot of times people need, someone to kind of help them guide them into the process a little bit. So we started doing that, and I just thought happiness coordinator sounds
This is
best.
great.
But then again, my website is Get Happy Divorce because I feel like at the end of the day, divorce sucks. Okay, it sucks. But the outcome of a divorce should be that you can find happiness again. That should be what the ultimate goal is. I don't care why you're getting divorced. It's not, and to me as an attorney, it's not important. You've made the decision, it's happening. Okay, for whatever reason, now let's figure out how to get you happy again. Let's figure out how to make sure that that next chapter you're writing is the best next chapter that you can possibly have.
Perfect. That's a great way to finish this segment. We have a small little segment to do, which actually I probably would have inserted first, but this is much more important what you're doing. And by the way, I think what you're doing is brilliant and needed in this crazy mixed up world of ours, to have this, the whole mediation, the whole prenup, I mean, all of this to make life so much easier and better, what you're doing. And of course, there's going to be knee-jerk reactions because, you know, there's a STAID, there's a staid world of legal stuff, and what you're doing is a breath of fresh air, truly, you know, from somebody who's been there, down that road. So what you're doing with Netsquire, I think, is great stuff. Truly needed. All right, you're in the cookie business,
I am.
and when I saw that, I did one of my oh wows because it's funny. One of the contributing factors to my marriage, which is now 48 years old, is the fact that when we first met, we spent some time together. She invited me up for a cup of coffee. I stayed a week, because you know that's the way you did it in 1976, I guess. I don't know, but that the morning after, you know, our four days nights together and stuff, I got dressed and she was teaching, and we were in Brooklyn, and I said to her, I have to do something today. There's a new cookie. True story, John. There's a new cookie that came out. I got to go down to Bloomingdale's. Bloomingdale's was the only place selling this cookie. It was called Famous Amos chocolate chip cookie. I don't know if you ever heard of it.
No.
No, it was called Famous Amos chocolate chip cookie, and a guy named Wally Amos was the creator of this, and they came in little bags, and they tiny little cookies, but I don't know what he put in there. But maybe the chocolate was like I don't know, but it was so good. So I said goodbye to the woman I had spent a few days with. Went down, took a subway, and went down and found those. And I bought like 6, 7 bags of those things, and brought them back to Jersey. And then decided not to call her because I was just so happy with the cookies. Anyway, talk about the bad chocolate. Oh no, the bad cookie company. How did
Yeah.
this come about?
So I think about 3 years ago, I had been making cookies for years. I like baking. It was always like a nice way to just de-stress. But I finally just got to the point where enough people have been like, "Oh, you should sell these. You should do something with it." I was looking for something to kind of allow me to get away from the legal world a little bit more. And I'm an entrepreneur, so I love to like start businesses. So I was like, "Oh, let's do this." So anyway, New Jersey had started a cottage law. Most other states had allowed people to start baking out of their homes, but New Jersey, strangely enough, we're very progressive in a lot of ways, but very behind the times in many other ways, and this was one of them. So they passed a law finally, I think in 2022, where you could start doing it. And I was like, okay, because having to like go get a commercial kitchen and everything was just it was a little bit much when I wasn't sure exactly what I wanted to do yet. So we started it out of our home. We started going to festivals. Just started with a few cookies. And here I am, 3.5 years later. The company has grown tremendously. We're in a commercial kitchen now,
Wow.
and we are really doing a lot of interesting things. Now, it's really interesting. The cookies are all fairly basic in terms of they're just chip cookies. All of them are just chip cookies. But I've developed ways of making them look really like big and well, they're huge. They're huge cookies. But really, at its core, what I love, and that's actually a very similar feeling that I have with what I just told you about that I'm trying to do with Netsquire. So I guess I like this feeling is I know that it brings people happiness to just enjoy something. And just one of my favorite things to do, and I have a festival this weekend, one of my favorite festivals in New Jersey, a punk rock festival, which has the most interesting, nicest people I've ever been around. It's definitely not my crowd. It's not the lawyer crowd. It's a very different crowd. But what I love more than anything is when someone gets a cookie, and I mean, they're huge and I see them walking away and I just see the look on their face of just the happiness of that moment, particularly the world that we live in right now and how everyone just seems to be pissed off all the time about everything and stressed out. It just brings me a lot of happiness and I enjoy making them. So it's like I enjoy making them and I see it and I get to interact with all these people and I'm talking to them about just anything and everything that has nothing to do with law, which is something I'm trying to get away from. So it sort of just snowballed to the fact that now, we ship our cookies all over the country. People are, hotels, companies are coming to us asking us to like provide for them. So we are actively looking for a spot. I'm hoping in Princeton to open up a shop sometime soon. I know the economy right now, I'm kind of, I think anyone opening up a business right now would justifiably be nervous given what's going on right now. But this is really, it's more of something that I love. It's a passion project, but it's something that has really brought a lot of joy. And, we have a lot of people that order all the time. So as much as I'm very perfectionist and I want everything to be perfect, I know that people really like it. And I'm hoping that we continue to bring cookies to New Jersey and the rest of the country for years to come.
I think that's great, and I really do think that's great because, like I said, I cookies were a whole part of my beginning of my marriage. Cookies, and today, and everybody knows that I do anything for that perfect. I could never understand, and I always say this to my wife. She makes sometimes she makes mandel bread. She makes chocolate. I said, why don't you just put stuff in there? Well, why are you so parsimonious and cheap with putting stuff in there? Just pack it, Just, but she not, doesn't. Hey, listen, I told you we had a little disagreement the other day, and I came home that night, and there was a whole thing of chocolate chip cookies, and that was it. I was in heaven. So, uh, hey, we did good. That's a line from one of my favorite movies, The Godfather, when Michael Corleone says to Enzo the baker, as a matter of fact, and they're standing outside the hospital and they're pretending they have guns and guys are going to come kill the Don and he said, let's just stand there, pretend we have guns and they'll drive away. And they did. And of course he's shaking. The baker is shaking because he's so nervous. And Michael looks at him and he says, you did good. And that just resonated with me. You did good. And we did good. This was great. So, forthwith, another legal term, forthwith, inviting you to come back in any shape, way, form, talk about whatever, talk about cookies, talk about whatever. You sit in this chair 12 hours a day. I've worn out a pair of arms to the chair, so be it. Come back, talk about anything. But really, thank you so much, John. This was great, and thanks to our friends who helped arrange this, Lorenz and Rhea and stuff. Uh, that was elemental. So really, thank you. Enjoy your vacation and stuff, and to be continued.
I
Thank,
appreciate you so much for having me.
thank you. I'm just going to stop recording. Don't leave.